We're ready to go ahead and start our next session, which is an educational plenary session with a number of recognized visionaries who have made an immense contribution in this area. At the end of the session, we'll have a short Q&A. Just wanted to remind you, if you have any questions for the speakers, you can submit that via the mobile app. We have a slide up on the projector with the instructions on how to do that. Again, if you'd like to submit questions, please do that through the mobile app and click on the Submit Question button, as you can see in the slide. The moderator for our next session is Pradeep Khosla, who serves as the Chancellor for the University of California, San Diego, and was previously Dean of Engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. At UC San Diego, he has initiated a comprehensive strategic planning process to develop a vision and a shared goal for the future of the campus. He is a recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Society of Mechanical Engineers and has been awarded the George Westinghouse Award for his contributions to improve engineering technology. Voted as one of the most influential Indian Americans, an alumnus from the IIT Kharagpur and Carnegie Mellon University, please join me in welcoming Pradeep Khosla to the stage.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everybody. Have we all eaten breakfast? Okay, I see the same faces as I saw last night, which is I hardly see anything. This is a session on MOOCs, and just to tell you a little bit about what this session is going to be, let me take you back to last night. Our keynote speaker last night was Blake Irving. And what did he talk about? Anybody remember? He talked about mashups, right? He talked about how an old way of doing business combined with some sort of new technology, which was mainly information technology, led to a new way of doing business and led to disruptions in ways that people had not imagined. Now, if you remember what he was talking about, he gave a lot of examples. And the only example that he did not give where a possible disruption could have happened was in the arena of education. And education as an industry is hundreds of years old. And MOOCs is all about asking the question, is there going to be a disruption in higher education? And if so, what's it going to be like? So MOOCs, MOOC, stands for Massive Open Online Courses. And we are really fortunate today. We have 4 people on the panel. These 4 people represent a different perspective. Each one of them represents a different perspective. We have the president of Rice University, and I'll introduce him in a second. We have a faculty member from MIT, who is the co-founder or the founder of edX, a nonprofit initiative. We have a faculty member from Stanford who created the first online MOOC, first MOOC at Stanford. He's the co-founder of Coursera. And then we have a faculty member from IIT Bombay who's leading the charge in India. So what you're going to hear are multiple perspectives. So as we go, I'm going to let our speakers talk for about 5 minutes each. Then they'll sit down, and we'll have a conversation. I'll start the Q&A, but I'm hoping that you as the audience are going to be involved very deeply. So all of these questions are going to show up on an iPad. So if you see me with an iPad out here, I'm not reading the news. I'm actually reading your questions, right? I may or may not pick your question, but I'm reading your question. So let me start by introducing our panelists. We have an amazing panel. The first person to walk on stage would be David LeBron. David is the 7th president of Rice University, and he's held that position since 2004. A visionary president. Under his leadership, Rice has grown by 30%. Its undergraduate enrollment has grown by 30%, and the number of applicants to Rice have more than doubled. And there's nearly 14,000 applicants for the class of 2011. David also has a very strong international vision. He's engaged Asia and Latin America very strongly. He also has a very strong local community vision. He's engaging the students with the local community. He is a recipient of multiple honors, too many to recite right here. With that said, Mr. David LeBron. David is, actually doctor, is a lawyer by training, went to Harvard Law School, so you never know what to call a lawyer. Well, we know what to call a lawyer.
A lot of people do know what to call lawyers.
Okay. The next person on is Anand Agarwal, a good colleague, a friend of mine. He's He's the president of edX, which is a worldwide online learning initiative, collaboration of MIT and Harvard, a professor at MIT in electrical engineering and computer science, and the director of the world-famous MIT's Computer Science and AI Laboratory. He's an entrepreneur. He started a couple of companies. He is a member of the National Academy of Engineering. He just got elected, by the way, so we should congratulate him. It was just literally this year. A good friend for many years. Anand, welcome.
Thank you.
Next on is Andrew Ng, who's a co-founder of Coursera, a faculty member of computer science at Stanford University. And he was, as I mentioned, the creator of the first MOOC at Stanford. And he also taught an online machine learning course that was offered to over 100,000 students. One of the leaders in AI research, a really young, dynamic, visionary faculty member. Andrew, welcome. And last but not the least is Dr. Deepak Phatak, who is out here, says born in April. I won't tell you what year. But he is a faculty member at IIT Bombay. He got his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Indore, his MTech and PhD from IIT Bombay, and he's been in IIT Bombay since 1971. In fact, when I was appearing for the JEE, I remember his name on the faculty. I'm glad he didn't get to interview me, but he would have been very tough. Dr. Phatak is leading the charge of MOOCs in India, and I'm so glad that you're able to join us. So with that said, I'm going to hand the stage over to David LeBron for his 5 minutes of, please. You can speak from there.
Yeah, I think I'll just sit here and I'm going to, in a very unlawyer-like way, try to adhere to my 5 minutes. And I have very limited number of points. The first might be to put a little bit of cold water on everything, because there's a lot of hype and excitement around MOOCs, and sometimes it's worth looking back at history. And you'll all remember something called radio. Some of you may actually still listen to radio. None of your students actually listen to radio. But radio sort of became popular in the 20s and 30s, and it was thought at that time that radio was essentially going to replace colleges and universities. And there was a big push that came. Courses were developed. People were very excited. They put on the courses. And by 1940, there was only one college-level course offered on radio, and it attracted, apparently, no students, as far as anyone can determine. So that's a kind of sort of warning that these technologies come in waves. People thought television was going to replace higher education. Some years ago, they thought the first version of internet-offered education was going to replace it. And so we may or may not be at a moment where everybody's excited about MOOCs, and it may be that 20 years from now, people will say, well, that was another radio. Now, I actually think that's unlikely. And one of the reasons I think that's unlikely is because although we spend a lot of time talking about MOOCs and the availability of online education from high-quality institutions to people all around the world, wherever they're located, as long as they have some device and a broadband access, just as important in that is the effect that MOOCs are having on our campuses with our residential students, and that the producers of the MOOCs are, in many ways, our best faculty. And so this deep integration between what our universities do and the production and consumption of MOOCs, I think is something that's very different about this time around. When our first professors developed MOOCs, and Rice is a member of both the edX and Coursera groups, when our first professors developed, the way they developed it was by developing it as part of their online campus learning and teaching. And when they finished it, what they said was they are never going back to teaching their class the old way they taught it. And so that connection between the two transformations is very important. So that's kind of the first point I wanted to make. Connected to that is I don't think universities, at least the ones like those represented here, are going out of business. What I do think is this is going to put a lot of pressure on us to determine what our value added is and how people should be spending their time. One of the things one of our professors says, which is one of my favorite lines, is that everything beyond the third row is distance education. Once you recognize that, you really have to question how people spend their time. And our institutions have a tremendous amount of value to add to education, but we do not add that value by having people sit in the back of lecture rooms and listen to lectures. And so one of the exciting things is we're going to have to rethink that. Third point is that when we talk about MOOCs, it's really only one piece of the spectrum. And so it's a little bit artificial to stand up here and say, let's just talk about MOOCs. If you sort of deconstruct that, and lawyers like to do things like deconstruction, you have massively open online courses. And you can take every element of that and turn it into something flexible. And so if you look at digital online education, not all of it's massive. Some of it's very restricted, limited to very small numbers in terms of some of the competitors in some sense of the two enterprises represented here. Not all of it's open. A lot of it's, again, very restricted and for large amounts of money. Not all of it's purely online. Some of it's blended, involves in-person contact. And not all of it's about courses. We're seeing a sort of whole spectrum from sort of lectures to mini courses to sequences. The whole idea of the packets of what an education consists of is being completely disrupted. And the last point I'd like to make is really about what the structure of the MOOC industry is going to look like. And there I think we have, with all respect to my colleagues here, I think we have really no clue. And if you look at some of the enterprises that we've seen develop over the past decade or so, and how they started out and what their roles are. If you look at Netflix, for example, right? Now, Netflix came on, and it was a big threat to the video stores, but not for the reasons the video stores thought, because what Netflix started out doing was shipping DVDs to people. That was its business model. That's not why the video stores went out of business. They went out of business because what became the model was streaming video, and Netflix dominated that business before they could dominate that business. If you look at something like eBay, right? What eBay came on with was this sort of casual online sort of auction site. What eBay now is, to a very significant extent, is the front online door for many small businesses. It enabled small businesses to have a strong online presence. And so when we think of the structure of this industry, what we don't know yet is whether organizations like edX and Coursera, are they going to be the branding of this industry? Are they going to be sort of the service providers of this industry? Are they going to be the front door in terms of where people go to look for their online courses? These are questions that are probably continue to evolve as the relationship, particularly between the best universities and the online educational industry, continues to evolve. And it may be that their functions change very rapidly over time, and how they relate to our functions also changes.
Thank you, David. Actually, it was very intriguing that you started off by comparing the advent of radio and what people thought its impact was going to be on education in this MOOC session. So am I to now conclude that MOOCs are going to go the same way as radio or would have a similar impact on education?
No, I think they're not. I think we ought to be just cognizant that we've been through these exercises before. I actually think, I gave one reason I think this time is different. I think there are a whole bunch of reasons. The other example I'll give, and then we'll move on, is I was at Columbia when something called Fathom.com was launched. Right. And I always recommend that people type in www.fathom.com and go to see where that takes you. Because where it takes you is about 2 lines on a web page that is all that is left of about a $40 million investment. And so it's a reminder that if you do the wrong thing at the wrong time, it disappears very quickly.
That is true.
But it's this integration, I think, between our business and their business that makes this much more sustainable.
That is true, and we'll pursue this a little bit further. Let me hand this over to Anand and see what he has to say.
Thank you, Pradeep, and thanks for having me here. I'd first like to talk about something I did at 11:45 p.m. last night. So it was 11:15 a.m. on Saturday in New Delhi. And so there was this big hall, and there were about 300 students in this hall last night, Houston time. These young kids had traveled from all over India, and they had come to Delhi. And I took a quick poll over Skype video, and about, I would say, 70% of them were currently undergraduate students. About 10% were high school students, and about 20% were people who had already gotten a degree. And so I gave a talk to them over Skype. What was interesting about these students, what was common to all of these students, were these were all of these students had taken MITx courses online through edX, and each of them had earned a certificate in one course or another. And so you can think of all of them as sort of e-alumni. And the Alumni Association of MIT had gotten them all together in Delhi. And they had traveled from all over the country and had come out there to get together. And these were hundreds of students and absolutely excited with the kinds of courses they'd done and the experience they've had. So just imagine a world where people anywhere in the world can take these great courses from places like Rice University or MIT or IIT Bombay or IIT Madras and so on. And no matter where you are, you can take these great courses. And these stories abound. So these are so although MOOCs, the word itself and so on is about a year and a half old, now let's be very clear that online learning itself is very old. It's 30, 40 years old. And in fact, with MOOCs, you've seen the proliferation of this concept where you have videos and interleaved with exercises. So you watch a video or two, and then you do that exercise. Again, that concept is not new. In fact, Eric Grimson and Tomas Lozano Perez in '98, were running online classes at MIT, and I'm sure it happened elsewhere as well, with these kinds of interleaved videos and sequences. So all of this stuff has been happening for a long time. So what's new about MOOCs is when Sebastian Thrun from Stanford about a year and a half ago, inspired by Sal Khan, from a TED Talk that he visited, put his AI course online and announced it to the world. And he had 160,000 students take the course. And following that, a number of folks, the folks from Coursera, the folks from edX, a number of other platforms as well, put these courses online to get staggering numbers of students to take the course. So we from MIT put circuits and electronics online, and we had 155,000 students sign up for this very hard course with differential equations as part of it. So these staggering numbers really brought a lot of hype to MOOCs. And I've been asked quite frequently, is this hype, this is hyped a lot, is this a good thing? And I say, if anything, what MOOCs have done is brought education to the front and center of the public ethos. Everybody's discussing education, and that is a really good legacy of MOOCs. Even if MOOCs go the way of Fathom or go the way of education over radio, the important point is that they've gotten the conversation going. I want to briefly talk about a couple of things that are also not so obvious about MOOCs. So I was traveling from Moradabad to Delhi on Grand Trunk Road about 6 or 8 months ago. And as I was driving along, I was fascinated on both sides of this road that there is an engineering college every 5 miles. And this engineering, there'll be a chai dhaba, and where you'll get your bondas, and then to get your fundas, you go to this engineering college. But the problem is, you don't get fundas there. What I've heard is that there are 5,000 engineering colleges, and apparently there are 50% staffed. First-year engineering college students are being taught by third and fourth-year engineering college students. It is shocking. So just imagine, one of the things that David talked about, the way professors are using online courses in our universities is in a blended model, where you combine the best of online and in-person in our own campuses. And the results are all looking very good. So for example, at San Jose State University, where they did that with the circuits course, they found a staggeringly good improvement in student outcomes when they combine both online and in-person. Of course, the professor also was extremely good. So just imagine in a country like India, where if we can promote these blended courses, where they can use these courses, instructors can use these courses as a new age textbook. So you're perfectly comfortable using a textbook from a colleague, Why not use the content from a MOOC course? We call this a SPOC, a small private online course. And so you can use that in a university, and the instructors, and just like a textbook, and whether it's a fourth-year student teaching first-year students, or whether it's an instructor using that, just imagine how good quality content can make a really big difference, whether it's in India or in other universities. The last thing I want to mention, again in the Indian context, is platforms. So right now, MOOCs are free. You can take MOOC courses for free. So edX is a nonprofit. We are founded by Harvard and MIT with a $60 million investment, and many of our university partners are also contributing, and so our foundations, to a nonprofit effort. So one of the things we did in June of this year was we made our source code available freely as well. Not just the courses, but we made our code available. And I was amazed. I was standing outside yesterday and today, and 3 people came up to me and said, hey, you know what? We've stood up your platform, and I didn't even know about it. I was at Columbia a few days ago, and they told me that they're using a platform that launched for continuing education. China took our open source platform and they launched Xuetangx. The Chinese Ministry of Education and Tsinghua created a consortium and launched Xuetang. France launched the France Université Numérique using the same open source platform. And most recently, for the Arab nation, the Queen Rania Foundation launched a platform. And we're talking to another half a dozen nations that are going to be launching national platforms using open source. And so this is very, very interesting, where by giving away the platform for free, so we are a nonprofit, we give things away for, you want it, you got it, take it. And you want to set up a competitor to edX, go do it. In fact, we know of 2 companies that claim they want to compete with edX. We say, here, let's help you. So the beauty of open source is that people can adopt it and use it for their own purposes on their own campuses or elsewhere. And other examples include Google, Stanford University, who are also collaborating with us, and adding to the platform and improving it and using it on their campuses. For Stanford, for example, if you look at class.stanford.edu, which is the internal platform of Stanford, is also based on Open edX. So just want to mention that you can give away courses for free. It's also interesting to think of how you might exploit an open source platform and use it for your own needs, whether you're a company or whether you're a university or if you're a larger region. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. It seems not long ago, maybe as little as 10 years ago, when the web started getting populated a lot, people said, you know what, the newspapers are going to go away because everything is on the web right now. Nobody's going to have a use for newspapers. So if you use similar analogy, I think the point you were making is if the web is the MOOC and normal teaching is a newspaper, the point you were making is normal teaching is not going to go away or is going to go away.
So the point I was making is that, and I want to make it very strongly, is that teaching and universities as you know it, my grandfather's university is not going to be the same. All universities are thinking about, as David said, what is their core value add? How should we transform ourselves? How should we use new technologies to improve how we do things at universities? And if you talk, I'll give you an example. If you talk to Professor Jamie LaRue, she's at the Mass Bay Community College in Bunker Hill Community College in the Massachusetts area, working with some of our courses on campus, ask her. And she said that if not for her presence in the classroom, working with community college students using some of these MOOC courses, she said these students would not have passed the course. So professors and universities are not going away. All we are doing is giving them new tools, much beyond a piece of chalk that we've given them for 100 years. We're giving them new tools to help them in their teaching.
Okay, so there's a lot more issues in the back of what you just said, but we'll come to that. Let me next go to Andrew. Andrew.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So I'm actually curious, how many of you have taken a MOOC before? Wow, okay, cool, quite a lot of you. Thank you for doing that.
They're all engineers, you know.
Yeah. So I guess most of you know how the MOOC movement has started. Just over 2 years ago, the few of us out of Stanford launched a few of the first MOOCs. And since then, Coursera, other organizations have been building out the technology and the platforms. And it's pretty humbling. Just 2 years ago, my team was just 5 of us with 2 MOOCs, and then Sebastian had 1. And in the last 2 years, we've grown from 1 university, 2 courses, to today over 100 university and other partners, and over 500 courses, and over 5.5 million students. Over 5.6 million students have joined us in the last 2 years, making Coursera by far the largest MOOC platform in the world. What I thought would be most useful would be for me to share with you, since many of you are familiar with the concepts of MOOCs, I thought I'd say a little bit about what we see from Coursera in terms of the trends going forward. So even though Coursera has its roots in higher education, and we think that helping our university partners, such as Rice, serve their on-campus students is one of the most important things we do, when we look at the broader transformation of the education ecosystem, it turns out that the typical Coursera student is not a 18 to 21-year-old student. And I think that the biggest impact we're having on the world outside our university partners' campuses is on non-consumers of education. And what I mean by non-consumers is students that do not currently have access to a great education. And I count two buckets among them. One is the working professionals, the working adults, such as many of you, that probably do not have great convenient access to continuing education. So the average age of a Coursera student is 30. Typical profile of students are 20s and 30s. About 80% of Coursera students already have a bachelor's degree. Our population is 31% US, is 8.4% in India, with India being the second largest participating country after the United States. And I think in today's rapidly changing world, where the half-life of knowledge is decreasing, I think the biggest effect of MOOCs in the short term is that we're bringing many working adults back into the educational system. Looking a little bit further out, I think there's a second large group of non-consumers, people that currently don't have great access to higher education, second large group of non-consumers of higher education that we're very interested in serving, which is students in developing economies. So I personally spent a lot of time in China, and we have several pilots running in India as well, in which we're exploring, similar to what Anand mentioned, these what we call disaggregated models of education, in which one source, one university, maybe IIT Delhi, maybe some other university, maybe a US university, can create online course content and also create course packs, which local instructors can then take to implement in a blended learning setting. So the students can watch fantastic content on the website and come into the classroom for small group discussions. And given the current higher education system in US versus India, I think in US there are large incumbents, and in the US, the higher education system is kind of functioning. We wish quality was higher, maybe costs were a bit lower, but students in the 18 to 21-year-old in the US today have reasonable access, like okay access to higher education for the most part. Whereas I think in many developing economies, in many parts of China, many parts of India, the teachers just aren't there. There is no good education to be had for any price. And so we think that just as many developing economies have leapfrogged laying down landlines for their cell phones and are instead jumping straight to mobile, we think that many developing economies may leapfrog the construction of brick-and-mortar universities and explore these disaggregated models of education where you can have content and local instruction, and hopefully hear about that in Akash Tab in a bit as well. So just to share with you maybe three things, good look in the future that I'm very excited about. One is, so what is Coursera doing? What are we focusing on? One is data. I think that with 5.5 million students, over 500 courses, over 100 university and other partners, Coursera today collects more educational data than anyone in the history of higher education has ever managed to. And every day, our university partners who have full access to the data, but our university partners and us are mining this data to understand human learning and to help our students complete better. When I speak at different venues, I often tell different stories about what we're learning from data, because there's so many of these things, but I'll just share with you one that might resonate with you as engineers, because this is one of the outcomes of our AB or ABCD testing. So here's something we learned. It turns out that if every week we send you an email that says, "Dear student, friendly reminder, homework is due this Saturday." If we send you that email, you're less likely to complete the class. But we found that if we send you email that says, "Dear student, we noticed you logged in last week. Good job on that, check mark. Oh, and we noticed you did the last homework on time and you got full marks. Great job on that, check mark. And we noticed you made 5 comments on the discussion forum that other students found really helpful. Great job on that too, check mark. Oh, and by the way, the next homework is due this Saturday. If we send that email, you're more likely to complete the course. And this is an example of something that we didn't discover by insight. Instead, we discovered it through A/B testing or ABCDE testing, in which we're sending tens of thousands of different emails to different students and just measuring what students were most likely to complete. And so I think with the scale, with the detail and magnitude of data we're getting because of our huge number of the students, our university partners and us are analyzing the data and will allow us to drive learning, drive progress in pedagogy and learning at unprecedented levels. Second thing that I'm excited about really quickly is mobile. We've been learning that in today's world, most students consume content on their mobile devices, and if you don't have a mobile app, or if you aren't optimized for the mobile web, then you're really not meeting students where they are. Moreover, we found that in developing economies, in most of Asia, as well, including India, it tends to be the lower income students that have only intermittent network access. This includes both the lower income students that spend long periods of time on their commute, on the bus, on the train or something, as well as students with, that have to travel to a village center and can get internet access only for a few hours when they're at the village center. And so we've been working on a mobile app which will allow students to download content onto their mobile device so that you can go to your intermittent network access, download the content to your mobile device, and consume it during the commute. And I think this will really help the lower income students make better use of the commute time. And we find that, and I think that meeting students on mobile devices is really critical, or else you really are not serving where students want to learn today. So we'll be releasing mobile apps in the coming months. And finally, there are many reasons why MOOCs are different from radio. Let me just say one of the things I think is different, which is that I think education is about a lot of things. I think education is about civic engagement, is about citizenship, is about your growth as an individual. But education is also about jobs. 85% in the US, 85% of students go to universities with the primary motivation of finding jobs, yet 38% of recent college grads are in jobs that require a high school degree or less. And I think one of the differences, one of the things we hope to establish is the value of a university credential or university Coursera credential that universities issue through Coursera. So here's something that I personally would like to happen. A year or two from now, I want there to be a lower income individual, maybe someone in the US, maybe someone right here in Houston, or maybe someone in China, or maybe someone in India. I want someone like that to be able to sign up for a dozen Coursera MOOCs. They have to work really hard to complete them because these are serious courses, but I want that lower income individual, like a checkout clerk working in California. I personally am friends with a few checkout clerks, but one of my friends, to be able to sign up for a dozen Coursera MOOCs, work really hard to finish them, and then list it in their resume and use it to find a better job. Because I think that if we can use technology at scale to give everyone access to better employment opportunities, what that means is we can use technology to give everyone a shot at the middle class. And I think this country, the United States, certainly needs that. I think other countries, perhaps India, perhaps China, certainly need that maybe even more. But I think that if we can give everyone on this planet a shot at the middle class life, I think that we can change the way the world is, we can change the way the planet is run. So just to wrap up, Coursera today is growing like crazy. We're a 70-person organization today. We hope to grow to 150 people as quickly as possible. We have 100+ university partners, over 500 courses, and the reason we can't scale even more quickly is just because we're a small organization. We've been talking for the last couple of years about this idea that education shouldn't be just for the elite, education shouldn't be just for the privileged, but that I think education should be a fundamental human right. And with the technology that we had created at Stanford and at Coursera, I hope that we now finally have the resources to make that a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Actually, you said many interesting things, but the thing that stuck in my mind was credentialing through a Coursera university partnership. Should I assume that this is the proverbial camel's nose in the tent, where you do these partnerships, then suddenly Coursera is credentialed, and acknowledged as a credentialing authority, and the universities kind of just, you walk away, and then people just take courses from Coursera, and that qualifies them for jobs? Is that the strategy long term?
So, let's say you have a son or daughter and they're admitted to Rice University. If they're debating staying at home, taking free online Rice University courses versus attending Rice University in person, for goodness sakes, tell them to attend the university. They get a much better experience. I think of Coursera today as serving two perhaps equally important populations. One is the hundreds of thousands of students out there that otherwise would never have access to a Rice course or a Stanford course. And I think to them, we deliver much higher access, quality access to content and credentials. The second smaller but equally important population we serve is the small group of, say, 100 students attending Rice University or attending Stanford or Princeton or Caltech or Columbia or Penn or our university partners. And to them, by helping our universities implement blended learning, putting the content online so that, to David's point, the faculty can provide the real value-add services, I think we're raising their quality of education as well. To address Pradeep's question that is most stock, I've sometimes been asked, will MOOCs replace professors? And to answer that, if you think about the best teacher you've ever had in your life, the best mentor you've ever had in your life, either from the very early grades through college, through grad school, if you went to grad school here, do you think we can replace that favorite professor of yours with a computer? I mean, I think the answer is clearly no. And I think that the reality of today's world is that we have amazing teachers that are spending all of their time in lecture preparation, delivering the same lecture year after year, with amazing teachers that are spending all of their time grading. And I think what MOOCs can do is free up these amazing teachers around the world from the more routine, repetitive parts of teaching so that they can spend their time in higher value services, such as providing real mentoring, coaching to students. And I think this will increase the quality of access to students as well. To most students around the world.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, at least some of you like the answer. Good. Let's go to Dr. Phatak. Let's see your view. You've been pushing MOOCs in India a lot, I know. We are curious to hear what you have to say.
I'd like to begin with some clarifications on Anand's remark on engineering education in India. Yes, it is true that we have large number of engineering colleges, about 5,000. There is another set of institutions which are different, about 100 of them. These include IITs, NITs, some very reputed old institutions which have academic autonomy, and some university departments. In these 100 places, the education is definitely comparable to global standards. But these 5,000 engineering colleges are affiliated to Indian universities. This affiliation system we picked up from the British, and in 50 years, we have significantly enhanced its rigidity, unfortunately. I myself studied for my undergraduate times in a college like that. We have a standard examination system, solve any 6 out of 10 questions. The questions are descriptive, explain this, describe this, write short notes, and occasional problems. And as an added attraction, questions are repeated across examinations over the last several years. So once I perfected that technique, I had a happy time for 5 years in my engineering program. When I came to IIT, life changed because my first exam was an open book exam. It says 2 o'clock onwards. I carried 6 books to the exam. There's no choice in the paper. Professor Isaac said problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, problem 4, problem 5. And I was struggling for 4 hours. I did not score well, but I learned a lot more in that exam. These two styles are different. The IIT system and other 100 institutions, as I said, have used their academic autonomy to experiment and be in line with the developments that happen globally. Now, there is no way ordinarily for these 100 institutions to influence the 5,000 colleges otherwise. But MOOCs, I see as a mechanism which permits us to essentially bring the best of academics globally as well as in India to a large number of colleges. However, I am not convinced that the current model of MOOCs is the most effective. For India, I have been advocating a blended model The reasons are twofold. One is that the students today have to study for their normal university degree, after which they will get a job based on the marks that they get there. And if they register for MOOCs, it's an additional work. And this is one of the reasons, in my opinion, why the completion rate in the MOOCs is dismal. So if 200,000 students register for a MOOCs, hardly 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 people complete it. And one of the reasons is they will give up halfway through, because the problems in the MOOCs online exams are like Stanford or Berkeley problems or MIT problems or IIT problems, whereas what they have to study for are the standard patterns. So the first thing we want to do is to make universities adopt the MOOCs grade as is, so that students don't have to do the double work. There is a problem there because universities would expect that the examinations are proctored, otherwise they will not accept the grades. There is a second problem. The MOOCs disintermediate the entire university system. Now that may be good as far as getting the good quality education to students is concerned, but that is bad because it disintermediates entire group activity that happens in a classroom or in a college, which is centered around the local teacher. So tutorials are conducted by local teacher. Discussions of and in the classroom happen in groups. And we believe that the teacher is still central to drive these activities. So in our blended model, what we propose is that the students will register for the MOOCs. The MOOCs course will be taken by the students, but the regular college teachers will continue to conduct classes, except that they will use the flipped classroom model to conduct tutorials and discussion sessions in the classroom. In addition, they will also give local assignments, including team assignments, which we have found to be extremely useful for learning teamwork and leadership. They will also evaluate these local team assignments and give marks. We propose that these marks are factored into the final MOOCs grade. So let's say 80% of the MOOCs grade for these students come from online examination. 15 to 20% comes from the local teacher's contribution. We believe that this will empower the teacher and will make the teacher's role central as a mentor and a guide to the group of students that he or she teaches. There is one problem we believe, that many teachers may not be comfortable solving problems in tutorial sessions because many of them have not solved problems of this kind ever in their own education. Unlike in the United States, only 10% of the faculty in these 5,000 colleges hold a PhD degree. Majority of them just teach with a first degree. Of course, third and fourth year students do not teach engineering college students, except by exception for few lectures and things like that. However, these teachers need extensive training. But that is something IIT Bombay specializes in. Looking at this quality issue of engineering education, some 4 years ago, the ministry started a project with me to train teachers. We trained 1,000 teachers at a time. We did it for 3 years. Last year, we scaled it up to train 10,000 teachers at a time. Our model is these 10,000 teachers assemble at about 300 remote centers. The lectures are delivered in the morning for a 2-week extensive program from IIT. These are interactive lectures. In the afternoon, the tutorials and labs are conducted in local remote centers for 30, 40 teachers who participate there. Under the tutelage of a workshop coordinator, we actually collect all these 300 workshop coordinators physically to IIT Bombay for 1 week to train them in IIT style of education. This training has been extremely effective. We have trained more than 40,000 teachers like that, and we ambition to train about 150,000 teachers more, for which in future we'll be using the blended MOOCs approach again. So we believe that this blended model will work better. We have 1.25 million students entering engineering colleges every year. They all have to do common courses. We believe that our first concentration will be to offer common courses, basic courses in engineering. We are going to start next year when we offer 4 courses in partnership with EDX. 2 of them, the thermodynamics course and the computer programming course, will be offered in the blended model as a pilot. I already signed up from several universities whose affiliated colleges have agreed to accept this MOOC grade and attempt this blended model. I will start with a modest 100,000 students first, and we hope to reach the million students of every year in about 2 years' time. We use, incidentally, the Akash tablet, which I perfected. About 100,000 tablets are already distributed to 300 college students. More important, the students of 300 colleges. More importantly, we are using these tablets for teachers training program, where quizzes are conducted using these tablets every day in our training sessions. And we expect this to become a delivery vehicle in the hands of individual students. Next year, the government is planning to roll out about 20 million tablets to students of high school and colleges. And we believe that by third year, every student in engineering college will have this affordable tablet. It costs about $40, so it is affordable.
So thank you very much. Now, you said a lot of interesting things, but clearly it seems to me that your scale as a country is like much bigger than even what we have done in the US in terms of what you guys are doing. So let me ask you if you have done any work or any opinion on learning outcomes, and what do the employers think about students educated through MOOCs?
MOOCs, I think it's too early to comment on the learning outcome of MOOCs. Globally, I would submit that it's only 2 years old, and you don't become judgmental in 2 years. However, I have had a feedback from the teachers that there is a course we conducted on engineering mechanics for training teachers. About 7,500 teachers just completed that course yesterday. And along with the feedback for the course, I asked them about the feedback on this blended model. About 3,630 teachers have responded as of yesterday. I believe statistically it is a useful figure. They believe that generally MOOCs would be useful. About 96% respondents feel that. They believe that a blended model that we have suggested is better than the just conventional MOOCs, about 86%. However, they believe that if they are given extensive training in the kind of problem solving that happens in IIT, MIT, Stanford, etc., 98% teachers believe that they will be able to take up this responsibility.
Right. Now, this is good. So we're going to go into an open session. Feel free to ask questions. There are some questions already here. But let me start with very high-level questions. Let me start with David, because as the president of the university, I think I would define his job as doing two things. One is balancing the books every evening, because at the end of the day, you got to make sure your revenues and expenses are balanced. And the other is worrying about the development of the student, this 18-year-old who comes in. And Rice, as you know, is an elite private university and a kind of expensive one. So, no, seriously, I came from Carnegie Mellon, MIT, Stanford. You can see they're all expensive universities out here, but nonetheless, people pay for that education. So let me ask you, as president, do you see MOOCs impacting the development of your 18-year-old freshman up to the senior year in a significant way, number one? And number two, do you see a significant impact on your tuition and a revenue model because of MOOCs?
Yes. So the first thing I should say of that group you mentioned, we're the least expensive in that
That's
group.
true. Spoken like a real president.
You know, if we take the word MOOC in this context to kind of mean the sort of online digital delivery of the substantive course content with some mechanisms for interaction and assessment. So I think one of the things that has enabled MOOCs is really the very rapid develop of online social networking technology. It's deeply integrated with that. Not only the technological structure, but actually the culture. So we're taking this to people who've now gotten used to a culture of communicating online. So what that means for us is we now, one of our professors, an outstanding professor, someone who had the best evaluations from students, has now teaches chemistry with a flipped classroom.
Right.
So he's already delivering the sort of basic course content through a MOOC technology and has now developed a MOOC for online consumption as well. And that's the integration I referred to earlier. Now, what does that mean for the student? That means that student, that 18 to 20-year-old student, goes to class, and how does he or she spend the time in class? They spend it working with other students on problems, interacting with the instructor. The instructor at the front of the classroom saying, here's my lecture for the day, which is the same lecture that may have been given for the last 5, 10. Nice thing, if you're not in a science field, sometimes it can be the last 20 years that you've given the same lecture. And that's not, I think as Andrew suggested, that's just inefficient. We ought to be finding the way for both students and faculty to spend their time. So I actually think that this is well delivered. This will improve the experience of the online student. And what we're focused on is all of these things that universities didn't used to do or did less. For example, leadership education, education and opportunities in sort of entrepreneurship, better communication education, more chances to be involved in research. We can now put more resources, human resources in those things, and people come out better. What's one of the #1 complaints companies make in hiring students these days? They don't know how to work together and work in teams. Well, this gives us a tremendous opportunity to shift our resources so that people learn to work together and work in teams rather than sitting on their own in the back of the classroom. And then your last question about the financial model. I think if you look at the value added in higher education for institutions like those represented here, whether it's sort of networking, access to employment, reputational branding, the whole holistic kind of theory of education, I don't actually think we're terribly threatened by it. Now, if we don't seize the opportunity for our students, we will be threatened, but not from MOOCs, but from other universities taking better advantage of the technologies that are now available. All that said, I think there are classes of universities and kinds of college education that are going to be deeply disrupted and threatened by this. And they're going to have to really rethink what their future model of education is.
Right. So if I understand you right, you're saying that the top N%, 30, 40% would be just fine. You would do more with the same amount of revenue with better outcomes, with no impact on tuition. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think 30 to 40%, if you look at the 4,000 some institutions, 4,500 institutions of higher education in the US, that number is probably too high.
I see.
And some of those other institutions, it's not that they're going to be threatened, but they're going to be threatened if they don't change the way they deliver an education. Many of them, if not most of them, will have an opportunity to change.
So then let me ask, Andrew, let me get to you, because you are a for-profit business. We don't have to talk about how much money is invested in your company. But clearly, when you think about people making investments, they're looking for a return. And when you think about disruptions, you're dealing with an inefficiency that you're going to get rid of and then extract revenue from there. So help me understand, in your mind, what is that inefficiency you're dealing with on the academic side? If you're just giving me more and charging me more, that's not helping the situation.
So we're actually very transparent about our finances. We've raised a total of $85 million. And we brought in, and the reason we set up, just share with you personal philosophy. Within Coursera, our philosophy has always been to do what's best for students. Way back, it was like for students, writing code. We came up with that as the rule #1 for then my small Stanford research project, and very proud that today it remains the #1 rule of Coursera. The reason we set up a for-profit, a social entrepreneurship rather than a non-profit was because after we had launched the first few MOOCs out of Stanford, we tried, my co-founder Daphne and I actually tried to raise funding as a non-profit, and maybe we just sucked at it, but we weren't able to raise capital as a non-profit, and we thought setting up a company was a much better way to raise the capital we needed to do this. So I think one of the inefficiencies we're addressing is lack of access of working adults, working professionals to continuing education, the sort of non-consumers of higher education. A second one is we also offer as a free service to our university partners the platform to help them implement blended learning, and that's a second and equally important part of what we do. In terms of business model, I think none of us think we have the right answer yet, but one of the innovations we're quite proud of was a way to issue verified certificates at scale. We use a combination of technologies to verify students' identities across the world. So it turns out, for example, that your typing rhythm, the way you type on your keyboard, that's fairly unique to you. It's like a fingerprint. So we use a combination of your typing rhythm and your webcam and so on to check your identity, and on the basis of that, issue verified certificates, because we know you really are the one that participates in the class and sat at the keyboard submitting the work. And so today, all of the courses are free. For philosophical reasons, it's important to us to keep all the course content free. But if a student wants to earn a verified certificate, we charge a modest fee, say about $50, $42 on average for that. And currently is our largest source of revenue. We're very transparent. We brought in our first $1 million about 9 months after launching it. So launched in January, reached $1 million in cash receipts as of October. Let me share with you one story though. When we launched this Verified Certificates program, it is by far Coursera's only, is by far our largest revenue stream, our only really interesting stream of revenue for now. When we launched this Verified Certificates program, all of us sitting around the table felt very strongly we needed to offer financial aid because $50 to most of us in this room are the cost of a nice meal, but to the neediest people in our society, $50 is a completely unthinkable amount of money. So if there's a needy student in the US or in India or in China, we ask them to fill out a one-page financial aid and we just give it to them for free. I've been told many times that worrying about or insisting on offering financial aid is not the decision of a normal company. But speaking as an educator, I felt very strongly that, if we aren't able to help the neediest people in our society, then, no matter how lucrative, I'm personally just not at all interested, frankly. And so all of us at Coursera felt strongly that we needed to set up the mechanisms to make sure that we really serve the people that don't have a credit card, don't maybe have a dollar to their name.
Sanat, what's your business model? Thank you. What's your business model?
So I think, as Andrew pointed out, right now all the MOOC providers are looking at various ways of revenues. I want to point out that we are a nonprofit, but that said, we want to be self-sustaining.
Right.
There's something called donor fatigue. It sets in around the 5th year mark.
I think we presidents know it pretty well.
Exactly. Absolutely. So in that sense, we want to be self-sustaining. And however, I think as a nonprofit, our revenue targets are very modest. To be self-sustaining and given our growth and so on, we don't have to get the kind of numbers that a consumer company would have to produce. So our models there are 2 or 3 models that we are looking at. One of the models that seems to be working quite well is that you sort of think of it as the course licensing model, where let's say, for example, we have IIT Bombay putting up a course on edX, and let's say another country, a nation wants to license the course, so they pay us a fee, and they offer the course on their own platform for their nation, for example. So that's one approach. A second approach is again charging a fee to consumers. And so we have so on edX we have three approaches students could take, 3 tracks. There's an audit track where many students don't care about a certificate, they just click audit and they just audit the course. Second one is an honor code certificate track, which is free. So if you can't afford to pay, we'll still give you a certificate, and they can just click on honor code, and they can do it. The third one is a verified certificate, where we work with a company that verifies identity, and for that they pay a small fee.
Right.
So there the revenues are a lot smaller. So we have these 2 approaches. One is a B2B, which is a licensing model, and second one is more of a B2C. But again, we're experimenting with a number of other ideas.
Okay. So let's see. Somebody out here says, I have a 3-year-old. How can she benefit from MOOCs? And why would you not address the K through 12 system with MOOCs? Let's see. Who wants to take that?
So, so with Coursera has actually done, we did a lot of thinking at Coursera about K through 12, and I think we realized that our technology is frankly not quite right for serving a 3-year-old or even a 7-year-old that's not yet learned to sit still for 2 hours and just do work. So one of the things I'm most proud of is we invested early in developing a sequence of courses on teacher professional development. We realized that our best way to get the 3-year-old or the 7-year-old a better education is we can go to that 7-year-old's teacher and cause that teacher to become more effective. So today, Coursera has partnered with a number of the top teacher training organizations around the world, and we have over 35 courses, actually 39 courses, I think. They're like training, hundreds of thousands of teachers around the world. Just to share with you one example, since you mentioned 3-year-old, just to name one of the courses, Dave Levine, the founder of KIPP. I guess we're in Houston, which is really the Silicon Valley of charter schools, right? So Dave Levine, the founder of KIPP, K-I-P-P, is teaching one of the teacher professional development courses for us. If any of you have children, what do you want your children to grow up to be? You want them to learn how to be curious, to be ethical, to be hardworking, to collaborative. What our schools teach them? Well, we teach them chemistry, algebra, sentence, subject, verb agreement. But is it possible to teach both of these at the same time? So Dave Levine today teaches a course on Coursera on how to teach grit of character, together with the very important subject matter expert. And if any of you have especially very young children, I think some of the Coursera MOOCs that we're targeting primarily towards teachers will also be useful to you if you want to learn to create better interactions, deep interactions with very young children that children or grandchildren you may have.
I'd love to add to that, which is, MOOC started out in higher education, but education is not the sole province of universities. Clearly, we all have children and we all grew up. And I myself, I know when I went to IIT after attending high school in Mangalore, where the standards were not that great, I didn't learn calculus-based physics. And when I go to IIT Madras, out of 300 students, 2 students on IIT Madras failed the first midterm exam, and I was one of them. And we didn't have, I did not know calculus-based physics. And so, to me, one of my big motivators are, how do we get the funnel? How do we get more of the high school students to take these courses? So just 2 days ago, we announced a partnership with College Board and Davidson College, one of our partners, to create AP courses and AP course modules that would be used in a blended setting in high schools. And they will also be available as MOOCs for students that can either augment their normal AP courses or take these modules to, and then take an AP exam later. AP exams are already competency-based. So MOOCs for AP and AP modules are a really good way to do that. And so we are definitely headed in the direction of high schools and middle school and so on. And our announcement a couple of days ago really demonstrates that we deeply care about the high school education model.
David, I know your university cares about high school education.
Yeah, and we already have been doing a fair amount. We have developed something called STEM Scopes, which is K through 12 digital science education. We produce, through our OpenStax effort, digital textbooks. And some of those textbooks, of course, although designed for the college level, are already making their way down to the high school level. And now we're sort of discussing whether that effort should be expanded into more broadly through the K through 12. But the point I'd make is kind of one I made before, which is, I think if you start talking about MOOCs, you've constrained the conversation in a little bit of an artificial way. There's this enormous spectrum of things. And so if you start with digital textbooks, for example, those textbooks are evolving in ways that are going to be deeply integrated with things that we now call MOOCs. And this idea that there's this one thing called digital textbooks and another thing which we call MOOCs, and they're completely separate, that's not actually going to be sustainable. And the last thing, I was touring a school, and I think it was in Los Angeles, and it was a KIPP school, actually. And if you go into those classrooms, and one of the things the teachers in those classrooms, a public or charter school, they're dealing with a student-teacher ratio which is probably not ideal, right? So they may be dealing with a 25 or 30 student per teacher. So how do you cope with that? Well, one way to cope with that is to divide the class up and to have different parts of the class doing different things at different times. And so if you have a MOOC-like technology in the classroom, you can have a third of the class spending their time on MOOCs, and you still have the teacher there. Because I think one of the things we know about early education is you're going to need to have a person there. You can't deliver very effective early education in a purely online mechanism. But it's a tremendous addition, and like in the higher ed, frees up the teacher to use his or her time more effectively. And so this teacher was managing in one room a very complex enterprise in which there were 3 groups of students, each doing different things, which she could simultaneously manage while focusing at any particular time, say on a group of 6 or 10 students, rather than try to focus on 30 students.
That's a good thought. Deepak,
I just wanted to add that we are doing a pilot with the high schools using Akash tablets. So the 4 schools near a town called Pandharpur, they are village schools which have been picked up. and we propose to run a blended MOOC for teaching science and maths next year to the 9th standard student, including virtual labs on Akash and Akash as a delivery vehicle.
That's good. So actually, in the U.S., we in the higher education business talk a lot about a 4-year graduation rate, 6-year graduation rate, cost of education, which is exactly why MOOCs have suddenly become a hot topic. But it seems to me that a good unintended consequence of MOOCs is to better prepare K through 12 so that when they go to college, the graduation rates are higher and the cost of education is cheaper. Would you, like in a binary sense, agree or disagree with this approximate statement? Or
I would just like to mention you were talking about revenue model. So $50 appears very modest in US, but we don't earn in dollars there, and our students are not as rich. So we believe, like Anand said, all our contents are free. They are actually released in open source under Creative Commons. We believe that interaction should cost some money, and we believe that certification or a degree or whatever should be for a fees. But our concept of fees is something like $5 to $10 per course, keeping in mind the purchasing power parity. However, we believe that if 1 million engineering students take that course, $5 million or $10 million revenue from a course would be good enough.
so, your comment reminds me of the license Raj, where what you're saying is that you should have the license to charge everybody a license fee or credentialing fee, and that's how you're going to make revenue. Did I hear that right?
No, as I said, we always release all our course contents free of cost. Since they will run on EDX platform, which itself is open source, every college or every university is free to set up that platform, take our contents and offer courses locally. We have absolutely no problem with that.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would say two things. You are going to see many students better prepared because the access they're going to have the college level courses from their home, very ambitious students. But the other thing, which I think may be more important, is it's going to make this quality of education, which for students in wealthy areas and prestigious high schools and things, they already have available.
Right.
But for students in rural settings and poor inner city schools, they don't necessarily have access to that quality and level of course, and now they're all going to have that in some form available. And the second part of your question, I think for some institutions, there is going to be a push to turn them, at least for some significant number of students, into kind of 2-year institutions, where students get their first 2 years more cheaply elsewhere, perhaps at a community college, or more cheaply at home, and then see that it's the last 2 years that those institutions really provide the value added. Now, I don't think, again, that's probably going to happen to institutions like ours, but I think you're going to see that general pressure of whether the expensive sector of higher education is going to be transformed in part to a 2-year rather than a 4-year.
That's right.
I'll give you an example that this is happening. There's a student, Amol Bhave, from Jabalpur in India. So he used to go to school. He used to bike 6 miles each way to go to high school. He was 15 years old. He took a circuits MOOC from MITx, and he did extraordinarily well. And then he applied to MIT, and there's many such stories of students applying to Berkeley and other schools. Applied to MIT, and on the strength of his overall record plus how he did in the MOOC, he got into MIT. And this fall, he came to MIT. He did extraordinarily well in the circuits course. Next, he's in EECS, Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. Next year, if he comes up to me and says, hey, I did this MOOC course and I did extremely well in your course. Are you really going to make me sit in your course and do the whole thing again? I think universities are going to see this happening in their universities and in all the universities offering MOOCs. And I think we need to come to an understanding of how we handle these students. My view is that, and this conversation I know is happening at MIT and other universities, they're talking about allowing students to take MOOC courses, and as David said, for the first year or even the first 2 years, to enable them to offset their campus credentials by taking MOOC courses.
Right. So, there are several questions out here that basically are of the same ilk, and I think a binary answer would be good, yes or no. So let me are MOOCs the end of Ivy League and other named fat cat universities?
No. And maybe the Ivy
come
League.
on.
Yes and no.
Oh, okay.
The end of
No,
university.
binary, man. Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Deepak?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so with that, let me then go to India now. So, you know, education in India has been really had two things, right? One was it defined the elite from the others. I mean, the Indian elite were really educated. And secondly, with broader access to education and more technology, many of us who sit here today, quote unquote, in the elite society, were actually born like in the poor part of the society, right? Now, I heard you say something about, what I heard was commoditizing education. So are you now telling us that in India, IIT Bombay and some other IITs are going to define the notion of 10 elite professors and everybody else is going to be a TA, thousands of them running around the country, managing your 10 professors' intellectual property? Did I get that right?
In fact, that is precisely
I'm
what
just being tough on Deepak out here.
that is precisely what we wish to avoid. As I mentioned, we do believe that teachers have a central role to play. Now, teachers have to have an opportunity to create their own innovative offerings for their local students. Our blended model permits that. Second, please understand the scale. We spoke of only engineering education, but there are 370 million children in India who are studying. And we don't have much time. Within the next 5 years, we have to reach them with quality education. In fact, the government has asked me to try to reach out to 30,000 colleges and subsequently to schools, first training their teachers and then offering MOOCs in a blended mode. We do believe that teachers cannot be and should not be disintermediated. For example, when I teach a course from, let's say, Sudarshan's book, database course, now do I not teach what he is preaching? What is wrong if in addition to his textbook, I also use his video lectures and tell my students, listen to those lectures, and we will spend more time discussing problems.
Right, so then
I don't become a TA because I still get to set problems which are specific to my local needs.
Okay, so maybe it's more complicated, but as a director or the president of your institute, why would I pay you the same as I pay Sudarshan?
You need not.
Okay, good. So
But the point is, I'm the one responsible for the batch of 80 students in my college.
Right. So
I spend 3 days a week interacting with them. I set assignments, I evaluate assignments, so I do a complete teacher's job, and I deserve a teacher's salary.
right. So maybe this
No,
other
but Deepak,
question
you're not,
might.
you know,
Thank you.
No, but Deepak, also very clearly, you know, most of us teaching and you know, in the professorial field are not doing it for the money. So whether you're a really highly popular textbook author or a lecturer or a teacher, money is not the key metric. So therefore, there'll be other ways in which you get.
I think that's a good
feel
lesson
good
for
about
David and
yourself.
I to remember. Let me ask one more question out here, which is pretty interesting, which says, how can you use MOOCs, and goes back to this question we were already talking about, to address different learning styles and diversity of learning groups? So how do you differentiate MOOCs? Instead of doing one thing and dumping it out there on everybody, how do you address different learning styles and different learning groups? Andrew, you're the AI guy. You should talk about it.
Sure. So, right now, most MOOCs run on one fixed track. We're experimenting with things like flexible deadlines and shorter, more modular courses. But I think that it turns out that a lot of the adaptivity that students want is just mastery learning. I think MOOCs are challenging a lot of the basic assumptions of how we do things at universities. For example, we like to collect everyone's homeworks in a stack, grade them all in a stack, get them all back out in a stack because it used to be convenient for us. But in a MOOC, when you have auto-grading technology or peer grading technology, which we came up with, we can challenge those basic assumptions. Maybe you don't need to collect all the homework at a time, and if a student doesn't get it right the first time, we can give them another shot because we have computers that have the patience to grade a student's homework multiple times. So in our early experiments with adaptivity, with getting students multiple paths through the material, we actually found that letting students control the pacing of the learning and letting students have multiple attempts at a piece of work, that actually captured a lot of the adaptivity that students wanted. We also experimented with giving students multiple paths through the material based on how you did on one piece of homework, suggest different pieces of content to you. So far, we've found that where we are in terms of the technology, that dramatically increases the cost of content production while having a relatively smaller gain to the experience of the learner. So we haven't, I think we frankly don't have the technology right yet for highly adaptive learning. I do think that there is an opportunity for there to be many great courses. I taught the first machine learning MOOC, and today there are like at least 5 different machine learning courses. So students can select the best one for them, and it will be different courses for different students. But I think we still have a lot to do on figuring out the technology to make the learning more adaptive.
Isn't there a lot of work being done on things called adaptive learning, where people are creating interactive tutors? And actually, Mark Camlett, who could not be on the panel, would have talked about exactly this issue of interactive tutors and adaptive learning, where the system adapts itself to the learning style of the individual. We have like a couple of minutes left. Deepak, you had
Just one quick observation on the spatial problems in India. This happens with the first year engineering courses, but they will happen in all other college courses. You see, the teaching may be in English, but the interaction between the students and teachers and among students is always in local language. So I'm taught thermodynamics in English, but I'll ask a doubt in Telugu or Tamil or Marathi or Hindi, and I will expect that answer there. So what we are trying to do is using the spoken tutorial concept created by Professor Kannan, my colleague, we are trying to actually create transcripts in local languages for many of the explanations. And we will expect participating teachers in our blended mode to actually contribute to this.
This is great. I know we could have talked for an hour more, but the big screens out here tell us to all wrap up. So with that said, please join me in thanking our panel. It was a great panel. Thank you very much. Really appreciate this.
Thank you.
And you were a great audience. And the last question out here says, tell me, how do I ask questions? Because it seems that we were not clear about how the questions show up on the iPad. Well, next time we will be more clear. Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, thanks. This has been a real thought-provoking plenary session and a wonderful start to the day. On behalf of the IIT 2013 conference, we would like all of you to please accept a token of our appreciation. Let's give them another round of applause. We're just going to take a picture.
There's a little bit of a snafu here. I'm supposed to announce the names so Vidhi can give the gifts. So right next to you, Vidhi, is Professor Deepak Pharak. Please. Thank you. Following him, Andrew Yang from Stanford and Coursera, sorry. Following him, Anand Agarwal from MIT and edX. And last but not the least, President David LeBron from Rice.
Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you very much, Pradush. Moving right along, our next session will start at 10:30 in the breakout rooms A, B, and C. We have a breakout on education, innovation, and life sciences. The breakout rooms are located on this floor to your left. We'll have a short break before the breakout sessions, and we'll see you all here for lunch and our next plenary talk at noon. Thank you.